All right, before we get started with inverse trig, I want to look at some interesting trig questions. In this case, we're trying to determine what sine is given two pieces of information, right? We're told that tangent is negative. So if I think about that, tangent being negative means that tangent cannot exist in those two quadrants. And then also, if cosine is negative, we know we cannot be in this quadrant, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my triangle in this quadrant here. And we're told the cosine is negative 4/5. So cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And then if I know this is a triple, I know this side must be 3. So if I were to do the sine of this angle, sine would be 3/5. So the answer is 3/5. And in this quadrant, sine is positive. So our answer is a positive 3/5. Okay, let's try another one. Over here, we again know all science teachers cry. We're told that the sine is positive, so I know sine cannot be here. We're also told that tangent is negative, so again, we're going to be in that second quadrant right over here. And the sine is 7/25, so opposite hypotenuse. Well, this is a triple, 7, 24, 25, and now we can find the cosine. The cosine would equal adjacent over hypotenuse. Since we are in the second quadrant, our answer will be negative for cosine, right? Because only sine is positive. Good. All right, now I got two for you to do. So feel free to pause the video here on the first one, and then I'll work it out. All right, let's see how you all did. I'm going to draw my all science teachers cry here. We're told that cosine is positive, so that means we cannot be in those two quadrants because cosine is not positive there. We're also told here that sine is positive. Well, I know then I can't be down here because sine is negative there. So I'm going to draw my triangle here. And we're told sine opposite over hypotenuse, right? Now this is not a triple, so I got to think about that. 2 squared plus the missing side squared equals 5 squared. Minus 4, or x equals the square root of 21. So that's what this side is here, square root of 21. And now if we were to do the tangent like we're asked to do, tangent is opposite over adjacent. And tangent is positive in that quadrant. So our answer is 2 over root 21. All right, work out the last one here, and then I'll go ahead and do it. So pause the video, please. Well, welcome to the solution of this one. All science teachers cry. We know tangent is negative, so I know we cannot be in these two quadrants. I also know that cosine is positive, so we must not be in this quadrant. So I will draw my triangle down here. And we're told cosine is, again, adjacent over hypotenuse. It's a triple, 7, 24, 25. Now the cosecant is reciprocal of sine. The sine of theta would be 24, let me write that better, would be 24 over 25. So therefore the cosecant of theta would be reciprocal, which is 25 over 24. Now we better check our sign to make sure. Cosine's the only thing that's positive there. Since we're dealing with cosecant, answer must be negative. Okay, this is a little review for you. Now, inverse trig. So the way inverse trig works is this. Gosh, what is this? All right, there we go. Sorry about that. So inverse trig, that's what this symbol here means. That's the inverse. Now, you can write it like this, though some people get confused and they think it's a -1 exponent. You also can write it as arc sign. Arc meaning inverse, which brings up a good joke. If we have Kansas, the inverse of Kansas is Arkansas. Anyway, okay. Well, to solve this question, we need to figure out what this means. I'm not sure what it is. So what we'll do is we'll do the inverse on both sides. So in other words, if I have the inverse sign here, the inverse of the inverse sign is just sine. I'm going to do the sine of both sides. Now, right now, we could just think about it like this. The sine and the inverse sine cancel each other out because they're inverses of each other. We're left with 1/2. So we're basically saying, hey, 1/2 equals the sine of what angle? And what angle gives us a sine of 1/2? Now, the thing is, there's actually two answers here. We know that the sine of pi over 6 is 1/2, and so is 5 pi over 6. But we only can have one of them because it won't be a function otherwise. So what we do is we have some things defined. I need you to write these down. It's highlighted in yellow here, but I think a better way to think about it is here. Okay. The inverse cosine exists in the first two quadrants, whereas the inverse sine and inverse tangent exist in the first and the third quadrant. So in other words, inverse cosine is from 0 to 2 is from 0 to pi, but the inverse sine and inverse tangent go from -pi over 2 to +pi over 2. Because that's what that interval would be, right? Like how far is it from here all the way to here? So let's see if we can figure out some of this stuff. This, let's see if it's a little better. Here we go. So this first one here, this one, the inverse cosine of 3 pi over 2 means the cosine of what angle is 3 pi, I'm sorry, inverse cosine of root 3 over 2 means the cosine of what angle is root 3 over 2. And I think we would say it's right here, pi over 6. Now, if I look at inverse cosine pi over 6 would work out, because pi over 6 is somewhere in that interval. Let's try this one here, the inverse sine of 1/2. That means the sine of what angle's a half? Again, I think it's going to be pi over 6, because the sine of pi over 6 is, in fact, 1/2. And pi over 6 is right here, and that definitely is in my green interval for inverse sine and inverse tangent. Now let's look at this guy. The inverse sine of -1/2. Well, I think we agree that the sine of pi over 6 would be 1/2. But to get -1/2, I think our angle needs to be down here at -pi over 6. Because that way we would have negative 1/2, right? If I do the inverse sine of it, isn't inverse sine negative in that quadrant? Let's look at this one here. So here we're doing the inverse cosine of root 2 over 2. So the cosine of what angle is root 2 over 2? And I think that would be pi over 4, right? Pi over 4, it's going to give us a positive result. We've got it. And then inverse tangent of 1 means the tangent of what angle is 1? I believe pi over 4. That puts us in the first quadrant. Tangent is positive, not too bad. So again, what we're doing is we're looking for the angle, right? And generally speaking, you're going to be doing just fine. The problem happens when we've got a negative in here, right? It's going to put us in a different quadrant. We're good if it's in quadrant 1, but sometimes it's in 2, sometimes it's in 3. You've got to refer to this diagram. Okay, let's look at some other ones like this. So again, I've redrawn the diagram. And some of these are pretty straightforward. Like I had said, these things cancel each other out. So the answer would be 0.12, right? Or these things cancel each other out. So the answer is 6. These other two, though, we need to be careful because if I say these cancel each other out and the answer is 5 pi over 6, that means the arc tangent of something is 5 pi over 6. I think the inverse tangent is only in this interval, and 5 pi over 6 is over here. So that's not going to quite work. We need to massage that answer a little bit. I like the idea of 5 pi over 6. Like this part here would be 5 pi over 6. But what's left? What is this angle right here? That angle there is going to be pi over 6, right? But we need to be in the fourth quadrant, though. So if I just kind of extend that out, do good old vertical angles, I can say that angle is going to be negative pi over 6. Another one we need to be careful of is this, because they definitely do not cancel each other out. So what I should do is I should just think about this. If I draw my triangle, and I'm going to be in the first quadrant because inverse sine is positive in the first quadrant. Now I know this would be 3 and this is 5 because inverse sine means the sine of what angle is equal to 3/5. So I've got my picture drawn for that. Now, this is a triple, so I know this side has to be 4. And the question says, okay, how much is this piece? This piece is this angle theta. And this says, what's the cosine of that? Well, the cosine of that would be 4/5. A little different on this. All right.